Well, Indiana followed up their massive win at Purdue over the weekend by laying an absolute egg at home against Iowa on Tuesday night. You know what it means? Another year without a Big Ten national champion. And why can I say national champion? Because it's March!
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college basketball show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Schade. With me, as he is every week, is our guy, Leif Thulin. And Leif, it is March, and I know that you and I are both on cloud nine as we get it. I mean, this might as well be December for all we care. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Network. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. Coming up on the show, we're going to talk about a couple major conferences that had teams grab conference regular season championships last night. We got to get bubbly. We got some good bubble talk, results from last night, and looking ahead to tonight, Wednesday. But first, Leif, Indiana lost at home 90-68 to the Hawkeyes. No miracle comeback needed for Fran McCaffrey's team this time around. And listen, Indiana had that massive victory on Saturday at Purdue. It was a great performance. And I was like, dude, Indiana could be coming along. Like, people are talking about this is a Final Four potential and other things like that. But all it says to me, once again, no Big Ten national champion since Michigan State in 2000. That trend continues this year. Agree or disagree?
I strongly agree. I think throughout most of the year, Purdue was viewed as a lock for a 1 seed as soon as they won their preseason tournament. And everyone was like, man, Zach Edey player of the year, and he will be. But the team too. And you and I have had this discussion of how they're so reliant on Edey to create their advantages. So their freshman guards get open looks, they catch and rip. But I think with scouting in the Big Ten and just knowing more about each team as every team does later in the year, you've learned that Edey is the offense. And the rest of the offense becomes stagnant, and the shooting numbers have really plummeted of late as teams have figured out how to handle Purdue's offense. And they don't have a guy who can really knock down shots like they've had in years past. Like, obviously Carson Edwards comes to mind, but I'm saying, like, they don't have themselves a Ryan Klein, even someone who's just a dead eye shooter, a Sasha Stefanovic. So that's the one team that people had circled early in the year. And then Indiana was the preeminent favorite coming into the year, and they started playing like it recently. However, I think they go as far as Jalen Hood-Schifino takes them, despite having an All-American candidate in Trace Jackson Davis. But Jalen Hood-Schifino is going to be spectacular like he was against Purdue, but he's also going to have games that are a bit head-scratching, like this past game against Iowa, 4 of 14, and he only had 1 turnover, but I feel like there was a lack of facilitation. There were only 2 assists, and the ball stopped with him. And I think that it's too hard to be reliant on 2 players like Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino for them to win. I don't think Iowa or any of the other teams from the Big Ten have enough horses to make a deep run either.
I think you hit on 2 major things there, one with Purdue and one with Indiana. With Purdue, for me, as teams have figured out how to stop them, Matt Painter is a phenomenal coach. Let's not take anything away from him. I think it's more of a personnel thing that they've just not been, now that the blueprint's out there, I think they're struggling, and that's why you see them dropping 4 of their last 6. Now, granted, only one of those is at home. It's tough to win on the road, but whatever, they still got to do it. And then the other thing, the point you made about Indiana, with they go as far as Jalen Hood-Schifino goes, that's absolutely correct, because Trace is going to get his. Trace Jackson Davis is going to get his. Obviously, he had an off game at Purdue, and that's fine, whatever. But that dude posts just about every night, more often than not. And the other thing in this one, it wasn't just Jalen Hood-Schifino. The rest of the supporting cast didn't help out either. Miller Kopp, 4 points. Race Thompson, 4 points. Like, these guys have to do more to help out. TJD is going to make noise, which I think they ultimately will. I think they're a second weekend team in my purview. Obviously, it depends on matchups and all that, but it's just they're not living up to it. And as you look down the Big Ten, going back to our take, it's like who out there could be a national champion? Who could be in the Final Four? Because at this point, I know I said national champion. I don't even know if I trust a Big Ten team to make the Final Four. Is there anybody, like, you look
I
at
don't
it.
think
No, we don't
so.
have the bracket, but who's in Houston out of Big Ten? I don't think anybody.
I don't think anybody either. I mean, right now Maryland's sitting in the second spot right now at 11-7 in conference, and Maryland has serious deficiencies. Northwestern has been like the plucky underdog story, and they're 11-7 in conference play. And I don't think they have the horses to get to Houston. Michigan has the talent, but they've been inconsistent. And you could make the argument they've played better without arguably their best talent in Jet Howard. And I don't think they could make like a similar run to what they did last year, which was considered a solid run and made the Sweet 16. Then you go to Indiana. We discussed them. Iowa doesn't play enough defense. Illinois, I said this at the beginning of the year, and maybe I was wrong, but I really did think, and I still do think they're the most talented team in the Big Ten. But I just don't like their chemistry. Their guard play is not very good. And then you got Tom Izzo's Michigan State. And if anyone can make a run, it's the guy that has March kind of pinpointed with his name. They're synonymous. But I don't think they have they're neither excellent offensively nor defensively, but they're solid at both. So I think they can win a few games. But that said, it's going to be hard to do from an 8-9 seed like they'd have to do. Like Michigan State isn't blowing anyone out, and they've kind of lacked the ability to close games. I mean, I was the obvious example. They were up 13 with a minute and a half to go and lost. They gave up 15 points on threes alone in 40 seconds and lost. And that's just, I think that speaks to the lack of just like pure athleticism talent that Michigan State has, because I think they've got good players. Like Tyson Walker and AJ Hogarth are very good. Jaden Akins is developing. Hauser's good. They don't have a dude. Like I wouldn't look at any of those guys and say, oh, that's the dude. And Michigan State's typically on their deep runs had a guy that's very, very good, even if he's not a superb athlete, but like they've had dudes, and they don't this year.
Well, Big Ten, thoughts and prayers to you. I mean, I think if any Big Ten team, like if somebody made a run and showed up in Houston, I do think it would be Indiana over Purdue and these others, but I just again, I do not see it happening. Elsewhere around the nation, just a couple quick on-off things before we get into Kansas clinching a share of the Big 12 and what Marquette has done. Woo, Marquette. A couple quick things. Zakai Ziegler unfortunately went down for Tennessee on Tuesday night. Early, first couple minutes of the game there at home as they were hosting Arkansas. Tennessee blew out the Hogs. Really impressive. But man, Zakai Ziegler, non-contact left knee injury. Still, like I've been looking as Leif was just talking, still no update on the actual injury and the time market. It's 12:15 on Wednesday, just afternoon. And no update, but unfortunately that screams ACL to me. If it's not, I hope and pray that it's not, but man, that is a classic ACL look. And if so, Zakai Ziegler's done for the year, and Rick Barnes is going to have to figure out some things. Couple other quick notes. Antoine Davis from Detroit Mercy. What a story this is. Detroit Mercy wins on Tuesday night against Indiana Purdue Fort Wayne in the Summit League tournament. And gosh, Antoine Davis drops 38, is now just 25 points shy of tying Pistol Pete Maravich as the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history. They play again on Thursday at 8. Now, of course, asterisk here. It only took Pistol Pete 3 seasons to do this, and Antoine Davis is doing it in 5, but it would count in the NCAA record books. And then finally, some great news for a great coach. Charleston's Pat Kelsey signed a 5-year extension on Tuesday, really hoping the Cougars can get into the tournament. I mean, you win your tournament and you don't have to sweat it, but they are very much right now, it looks like on the outside looking in bubble wise, if they do not win that conference tournament. So Leaf, some interesting stuff there around the nation. We do want to get to. Check this out. Marquette was picked preseason number 9 in the Big East, and they just outright won the regular season championship. How on earth did that happen? We're going to talk about it in just a second. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, we're at the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel app, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. So download the FanDuel app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers. Will LeBron James ever get back? I don't know if that prop bet's on there, but why not? Sounds fun. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same game parlay. So, folks, don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to fanduel.com/locked on. Once again, fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook betting partner of the NBA. And of course, for those of you watching UC, rocking an old school Vince Carter jersey behind Leaf and some D Wade Miami, that pink is hot. It's beautiful. It's popping, Leif Thulin, and I'm here for it. So Tuesday night, Marquette. This team, Shaka Smart's second year, picked number 9 in the preseason Big East poll. And all they do is just go out and win not just a share of the Big East regular season championship, but they win this thing outright. We're going to get to Kansas in just a second. But Leif, how impressive is this team and what Shaka Smart has done?
I mean, they're awesome. The Marquette Golden Eagle behind me, Dwayne Wade, would approve.
Yes,
I think people slept on Marquette because they didn't have they didn't have guys that had bona fide basketball experience at the college level. They had talented guys that made a tournament, but they put up pedestrian stats. Like Tyler Kolek was an average guard last year, played in the tournament. Oso Ighodaro, same idea. Olivier Maxence Prosper, same idea. And then I think you saw early in the season, Marquette beat Baylor badly. And they had a few, they played Purdue close when Purdue looked like they were the best team in the country. But I watched them play UConn, and this was very early January, and UConn was up 12, 13 points in the first half. And I was like, man, Marquette's getting okay shots, but UConn's defense was stifling still. And then they went on this huge run, closed the half, made it a 4-point game entering half. Then they outscored the Huskies by 10 in the second half. But honestly, it wasn't even that close.
No.
And I think I told you or Andy, and that I really like this Marquette team along with Xavier. And I said, I don't know if it's sustainable because their defense isn't quite that great, but their offense is so good that I have belief that they can win games in March. And typically, to make a deep, deep run, you need to be top 25 in both offense and defense. Right. And they're not quite there. But offensively, this might be the best team in the country. And if you haven't seen Marquette, just because it's not the most premier school, I highly, highly recommend it. Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro are the engines that catapult this team. I think that Marquette's a team that probably is going to end up with a 3 or 4 seed. Yeah. But given the matchup, if they get a matchup against a team that doesn't score great, even if they're good defensively, I think Marquette can cause some havoc.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that Baylor game because I've been thinking of them quite similarly to Baylor. Both of these teams right now are top 5 at Ken Pom in offensive efficiency, but both outside the top 50. I think both outside the top 60 at Ken Pom defensive efficiency. And as you said, I mean, it doesn't mean you can't win a national championship or go to the second weekend or even the Final Four, but it is a thorn in your side. And so that's what we have to watch for specifically with this team is, do they have enough on that side of the ball, the want to, right? I think schematically they can do it, but that drive and determination there for Shaka Smart's group. And you hope so. But like you said, I basically had written them off preseason because you think about losing somebody like Justin Lewis to the NBA and it's hey, they had a great run last season, got blown out in the NCAA tournament by North Carolina, who was finding their, that was right as they were finding their stride. But, great. And then it's going to be a rebuilding year, and then we'll see what happens from there. But it was not a rebuilding year. The other teams are the ones doing it. And so everyone else has fallen at least 2 games behind them in the Big East standings. Xavier 13-5, Providence 13-5, and then Creighton 3 games off at 12-6. So, man, the Big East, it has been so fun this year, and I never would have guessed Marquette would have been the one to come out the cream at the top of the crop there. Leif, let's turn our attention to the Big 12, the best conference in all of college basketball. And I remember thinking preseason, man, can the Big 12 win 3 national championships in a row? And I kept looking at the teams, trying to talk myself into, I don't know, maybe one of these teams could do it. And then we look up now and it's honestly, I'd be surprised if a Big 12 team didn't win the national championship this year, the way things are going. So on Tuesday night, Kansas clinches at least a share of the Big 12 championship with a win over Texas Tech Tuesday night. They can clinch this thing outright. Tonight, Texas goes to TCU. That is a tough assignment for the Longhorns, especially with Mike Miles back and going. Or if Kansas on Saturday in Austin, I cannot wait for that game. That would also give them an outright Big 12 championship. Yet again, Bill Self does it with arguably one of his least, at least on paper, least talented rosters, and they put it together. Jalen Wilson's done what he had to do to step in and be a superstar. Grady Dick has been arguably better than anyone could have imagined he would have been this year. All these things, the pieces to me just fit, Leif. And that's the thing. For me, great. You won your regular season Big 12, at least a share of it. I think I want to dream bigger than that for Kansas. I just said the pieces fit. But the thing is, I think they fit big enough where Kansas could legitimately repeat as national champion. Is it in the cards?
I mean, they certainly have a claim to it that they'd be the third back-to-back national champion since 1985. You've got Duke with Christian Laettner, and then you've got the Florida Gators with Joakim Noah, Al Horford, and now potentially Kansas. Kansas has a better claim than just about any other team that has won and then has had aspirations of winning it again. There have been different times in this year where I've thought, I don't think they're contenders. Like we talked about our top 8 contenders a long time ago, and yep. I had them on the periphery. I had them at like 9. And then I shortly after that, I was like, man, they might be the best team in the country after they kind of went on this hot streak of beating teams like they beat Indiana like a drum. They beat Harvard, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Iowa State in a row, as well as Missouri. And I was like, okay, maybe this team's really, really good. And I trust Self. I really trust coaching. And I was like, man, they're the best team in the country. Then they lost 3 games in a row. And now they've won a bunch of games in a row again. And I think it's all leveled into the fact that Jalen Wilson's been a star all year. Yep. Grady Dick's overachieved as a freshman. Yep. And then they took a guy like Kevin McCullough. And I made this point on a different podcast. I said, Kevin McCullough was down to Gonzaga and Kansas. Had he gone to Gonzaga, I think Gonzaga would be in the front row of national championship contenders, and Kansas would be kind of in the periphery like Gonzaga is. And instead, he's at Kansas, and he's made an enormous impact, being the best defender in the Big 12, if you ask me. And he fits their team perfectly. Him and DeJuan Harris hound the guards, the perimeter players. Jalen Wilson, Grady Dick do a lot of the scoring. And then the interior, they play through KJ Adams to kind of be a short roll option. And Bill Self just knows how to get the most from his players. My one concern about them and why I don't know if I'll take them is, should they get in foul trouble? I find their depth to be pretty short. Like against Kansas State, when they lost in Manhattan, they were the better team in the second half. But Jalen Wilson, KJ Adams, and I think Grady Dick got in foul trouble. And it's hard to do. If there's a close game, it's highly competitive. You're going to play nearly all 40 minutes with your starters in March. And if you get into foul trouble, and you have to go to a depth bench that's not particularly good, especially in the front court, I have a few concerns, but there's not too many teams that can punish you in the front court like that.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, I while you were talking, looked up, Joe Lunardi has now moved Kansas past Houston for the second overall team behind Alabama. And so 1 seeds right now, Lunardi has Bama 1, Kansas 2, Houston 3, and Purdue 4. I'm still skeptical on Purdue sticking as the 4th number 1 seed, but a lot of the bracketologists have them buying that. Well, another quick one, and then we'll continue to move along. We didn't mention it, but the ACC, Pittsburgh at Notre Dame tonight has a chance with a win, not a chance. If they win, they will at least have a share of the ACC regular season title. They were picked even farther down than was Marquette, which obviously because the ACC has more teams, but Pittsburgh was picked 14th in the ACC preseason poll and could tonight share at least a share of the ACC regular season title. And by the way, Joe Lunardi also says one more victory. If they win this game tonight, they are a lock as far as he is concerned. Well, wild stuff there, as always, all around the nation. Leif, we need to get bubbly because that's what the good people want to hear. All the great bubble talk. We just talked about Joe Lunardi. We'll have some more stuff from him, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. All right. let's get bubbly. We want to recap a few things that happened on Tuesday night and then get you primed a little bit for some games to keep an eye on for Wednesday night in terms of the bubble. Before we get into games, let me give you Lunardi's latest update. Last 4 buys. So these are teams that are in the tournament that don't have to go to Dayton. That would be Memphis, Boise State. We're going to talk about them in just a second. West Virginia and Auburn. We're going to talk about them in just a second. Last 4 in. So these would be the 4 play-in teams that go to Dayton. Mississippi State, Nevada, who took an Wyoming the other night, Arizona State, and Wisconsin. First 4 out. That would be the teams. These would be like your 1 seeds in the NIT. UNC, Oklahoma State, Michigan, and Utah State. We'll talk about them in a minute. Next 4 out, Clemson, Charleston, Penn State, and Texas Tech. So, Leif, let's go to some of Tuesday's action. I actually want to start not in Charlottesville, Virginia. I want to start in Boise, Idaho, where Boise State is kind of just right there on that brink. They were on the plus side of the bubble on Tuesday night, before the game, according to most people, and things were looking dire. They were down by 8 with 4:48 left to San Diego State, number 18 in the nation. And then they closed the game on a 14-0 run. And now, as we just said, according to Joe Lunardi, he has them as a buy. Like, they're in the field solidly right now. Are you buying that? Are you with it? What do you think about this Boise State team?
I do buy them. I've actually watched a fair amount of their recent games because they're in my time zone, the Mountain time zone. So I get to see them play fairly frequently. They've got a really good chemistry and just kind of know how to play together. They work well together and have trust at the end of the games, which I think really matters for these type of. I don't want to call them a real mid-major, but for the sake of saying a non-power 6 right here,
right,
you kind of need to be veteran and experience to win close games, and that's what they do. I do think they need to win a game or 2 in their tournament. They don't need to win the Mountain West tournament to get in, but if they win a game or 2, I feel very confident. I think they're probably as confident. I think West Virginia is the team I feel most confident on that's on the bubble that I think for sure will get in. I think their resume is very, very good, and they've got very good wins because they're in the Big 12. They have a lot of losses for that same reason, but if you look at the wins, I think it factors in. So those are the 2 teams I feel the most confident about.
And let's quickly remind people as well that the committee is not looking at conference records. They're just looking at your record. And so, because a lot of people will say things to me like, West Virginia, what do they have? 5 or 6 Big 12 wins? Yeah, great. It doesn't matter. The committee's not looking at your conference record. They're looking at the overall totality. Anyway, sorry to cut in, Leif, but just wanted to make sure we say that always.
No, and that's a very good point of distinction, and I think that's why there's even a claim for a team like Texas Tech, which was 0-8 to start Big 12 play, and now is riding the ship only to a degree. I don't think they'll get in unless they make a deep run in the conference tournament. But the point is here is, and you can weigh in on this as well. I think the teams that from smaller conferences have to win a few in their conference tournaments, even if they have good records, just because they need to add to their resume. It's just harder to stand pat when they're small, as opposed to Auburn or a team like Mississippi State or, of course, West Virginia and Texas Tech. I think if they have 1 win, it's going to be such a boon to their resume. It buoys it enormously. So I think the Mountain West teams, Nevada and Boise State, need to each have good weekends entering March Madness to get into it.
Yeah, they do. And interestingly, to wrap up the regular season, Boise State actually goes to Utah State on Saturday. And those are both bubble teams right now, with Boise State on the good side of it, Utah State down in the first 4 out. And so would be looking, if Utah State can get that win at home, it would do wonders, hopefully, for their resume. But then obviously, as you said, we will look to next week's conference tournament as well. So some interesting stuff there and great points. I do want to go turn our attention to Charlottesville, where teams were watching both Virginia and Clemson, not because Virginia's on the bubble, but because Virginia is close to that quad 1, quad 2 cut line in terms of where they're at in the net. So Virginia beats Clemson. And so for Clemson, this is rough news, right? Like, they now fall even further. They're into Joe Lunardi's next 4 out. So they would be the 5th team on the outside looking in right now, which is very difficult for Brad Brownell's team, who at one point were undefeated in ACC play and looking to lead the way, but they've got some quad 3 and quad 4 losses on their resume that really ding things up there. They do get Notre Dame at home to wrap up the regular season, but then I think need to make some noise next week in the ACC tournament to have any sort of prayer, maybe even need to win and take the decision out of the committee's hands. As for Virginia, this is interesting. They went into Tuesday 28th in the net, and they win at home against Clemson, and you think, oh, good, that's safe for teams that need them to stay in the top 30, but they actually dropped to 29th on Wednesday morning's refresh, still within that top 30, but that's essentially good for teams that have a win over Virginia at home. So that would be Miami, Pittsburgh, Virginia Tech, Boston College, who, they're not really a bubble team, and North Carolina. So really, as you're thinking about Pitt and North Carolina, the two teams where that quad 1 win is going to matter more, that's a big deal to keep them there. But let's go back to the Clemson of it, Leif. I mean, this is it's tough spot for Clemson because of that relative weakness of the ACC that they, obviously Notre Dame, that's not going to move the needle beating them on Saturday. So they really have to make noise next week at the ACC tournament.
Yeah, I concur full-heartedly on that. I think that Clemson would need to, I mean, they have to beat Louisville, obviously. They have winnable games to end the year. And had they beaten Virginia, I think they'd be in a very good spot. I think it's similar to the way, not in the same sense, Arizona State beat Arizona in an unlikely road win, and that's boosted them into Lunardi's last 4 in. Yep. And I think they were going to be in the last. They were going to be the first 4 out. Like that was a huge swing. I don't think Clemson's win over Virginia would have been that momentous, but they need to now kind of find a way through the. I'm trying to make a bracket in my head for the ACC tournament. So right now they'd be the 5 seed. So that means they need to beat the 12, and then they need to get a win over Duke, it looks like. And right now Duke, I mean, you won't like to hear this, and I don't really like Duke either, but they're playing the best basketball in ACC. Yeah. And I don't think it's particularly close right now. I'm not saying that they're the best team overall, but right now they're playing the best basketball.
And that's what matters in conference tournament.
Path to furrow.
Yep. Yeah, that's 100% correct. For a while, it was Miami playing as the best team in the ACC, but Duke has taken on that mantle now. And as for, while we're touching on Arizona State, they've got a rough wrap up to try to make it in terms of the regular season. They've got to go to the LA schools this week. If they could get a win at UCLA or USC, that'd be great for their resume, but I fear that could be an 0-2 weekend to wrap things up for the Sun Devils. A couple other bubble results from Tuesday night. Obviously, we already talked about the Kansas side of it, but a tough loss for Texas Tech after they couldn't win against TCU on Saturday. And then Mississippi State did what they had to do. You cannot lose to South Carolina, and it was closer than it should have been, but they won, and you move on. That's what you're doing this time of year. And then New Mexico kind of hangs around a little bit with that win over Fresno State, but as we've already talked about, they are right now on the outside looking in, even further beyond that next 4 out category. In terms of a few things to watch out for on Wednesday night, Leif, and then we'll get out of here. Auburn at Alabama. This is a big game for both teams for 2 reasons. If Alabama should lose, Kansas is going to be the number 1 overall team in Joe Lunardi's projection. I would imagine some others as well. As for Auburn, they have stumbled and struggled. And honestly, I mean, they are to the point now of, like we said earlier, last 4 byes. If they lose this game to Alabama, they're going to fall to last 4 in at best. Right. And so, man, like Auburn, has kind of come out of nowhere to be very bubblicious, and I'm nervous for them.
Yeah. Auburn's a team that can play stifling defense, but has enormous dry spells offensively. And I don't think that'll bode well against Alabama at Alabama. However, Alabama's given people chances. Like they were in Tuscaloosa, and Arkansas had a chance to tie the game with a decent look at it that Ricky Council missed. And then against South Carolina, Brandon Miller had to score 41 points to beat a lowly South Carolina team. So Auburn has a chance. Yep. But I'd imagine they lose, and then they would fall to 9-8 in conference play, 19-11 on the year. They're 13-2 at home, 4-8 on the road would be what they'd be.
Yeah. And they wrap up with Tennessee on Saturday. So it doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, and Tennessee, I mean, I'm not going to say I buy Tennessee enormously, but I will say this. When they have Josiah Jordan-James and Julian Phillips, they're considerably better than they are when they don't.
And Julian Phillips
not like a surprise. But that said, they beat Alabama without those two players. So Tennessee is a good team by no means. So Arkansas, I think, is truly a bubble team. I don't expect them to go 2-0 for sure. I'd say 1-1 is a success for Bruce Pearl's squad. And I think they fall to the bubble. And I think a team like your Carolina Tar Heels, should they beat Duke, and that's a quad one win. Yep. And who's the other one that Carolina plays this week?
They already won. They beat Florida State on Monday.
That's right. They beat Florida State. So you beat Duke, and you win one game in the ACC tournament. And I think Carolina has a more compelling argument than does Auburn. I think they've got better wins, even though they've been not very good. But I think that Auburn finds themselves in a very difficult spot because they likely go 0-2 this week, and they likely get a tough seed in the SEC tournament where teams are all desperate. Like the second-ranked team in the SEC right now is, and seeded, I should say, is Texas A&M, and they're an 8 seed. So they're going to be vying for every possibility to move up and not be an 8 seed. And they're 14-3 in SEC play. Like that's crazy.
And Auburn's tied for 5th in the SEC right now with Missouri and Vandy. But as we said, if they go 0-2 this week, they're going to tumble, and that seed is going to look even worse. A couple other games to keep your eyes on tonight in terms of bubble teams. Penn State is at Northwestern. As a reminder, Penn State is next 4 out right now. And then Utah State at UNLV. Utah State's in that first 4 out. They have 0 quad one wins right now. They need to get one, and UNLV ain't going to be one. So Utah State is looking to get that coveted quad one win. Interesting stuff always in the bubble world. We're going to be talking all about it all the rest of this week, all of next week as we get into more conference tournaments. It is March. It is awesome. Things are going. Leif Thulin, we're in our happy place, and I am here for it. Thank you so much for joining us today. Great stuff as always, brother.
Of course. March Madness is the best time. 3 days of conference tournaments, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then the first 4 days of Madness, best 7 days of the year for me. It's not even close.
Let's get after it. It's all happening. Thanks so much for joining us today. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show on YouTube and wherever you listen. Smash the like button. Leave some comments on your thoughts on the bubble teams and some of the other stuff we've talked about today. As always, my apologies to the Lawyer family, and until tomorrow, peace.